Hey guys, I'm back. I had a couple things that I forgot to put in my video last night that I was talking about porting a set of these Summit Dart 165 small block Chevy heads that I kind of left out but are fairly important. It's not that this stuff you can't find out. You will find out by experience, but stuff that I had to figure out over the years. Nobody really told me. So, stuff that seems simple enough, but it is important, and it's things that have helped me quite a bit. Um, First thing I want to talk about is, when I'm porting these chambers or basically unshrouding the valve, whatever you want to call it, I did not enlarge these chambers, out to the head gasket size. I would if these chambers were a poor design, or if this was more of a max effort deal. I would even run a larger bore gasket than the engine block bore size, because it will actually still flow more air and make a little bit more power, even though the chamber size is larger than the block bore size. That's something I've only learned from being on the dyno and flow bench at other places and things. But when I'm doing that, after I lap in the valves to just get a pattern, see where the valve seat, exactly starts, so it just kind of gives me a witness mark. And I also check the seat concentricity, make sure that the valve's going to seal, all that jazz, and see where it sits on the margin of the valve. So you can see you'll see kind of a shadowy gray line, if this will focus. And it's kind of hard to see, but out towards the edge of the valve seat, you can see that mark that goes around the edge. That's where the valve seals. Not the greatest phone camera deal. But anyways, the more important thing is, what I do is I'll find a couple of used valves, and I will take used valves that are smaller by a little bit than the valve size I'm running in the heads, and I will put them into the seat. Doesn't even matter if the valve stem's even a little bit smaller than what you're using. But you see how that blocks the valve job from getting damaged from a grinder cutter? That's a major way to do this without hurting your new heads. It's just, if you nick the deck or anything like that, nowhere near as bad as if you nick the valve job, unless you hit the deck real hard. A little rub mark from the sanding roll, that's not going to hurt anything. That's not going to do anything. Don't need to worry about that. You do want to be careful. If you're concerned, you can take painter's tape and mask the deck surfaces, and then just cut out your chamber area, and then you can mark over that with a Sharpie or whatever, the area that you want to remove. That's one way to do it. But if you're real concerned about hitting anything, or if you're not sure if you can do it, I suggest you practice on a head that isn't important. And once you get good at that, then you can move on to the heads you're actually going to use on your engine. Like I said, you really don't want to have to buy a new head or pay for more machine work on a brand new cylinder head. And then cutters. Cutters are a big deal. For years and years and years, I used I'll show it. I still got it. Got a grinder that I used forever. This guy, one of these short little guys, and I had short little cutters. And you can always tell when somebody doesn't port heads for a living or do it very often, because everything that's ported on their heads is just the first couple inches of the exhaust port, of the intake runner. You have to get extended bits, and I have extended. These are a 6-inch shank, 1/4 inch. This is a single cut, and this is a 1/2 inch, and it is it's an A-shaped 1/2 inch. You can do almost everything with this shape of cutter. I only buy this, and I have a bunch of these that somebody gave me, but these are just these are shorter one. These work really good for around the valve guide on the exhaust side. You don't want to have to just cut a whole bunch of material off around the valve guides. You just, if you're just trying to skinny it and blend it into the walls and smooth it out, you need something a little bit smaller. So it's better to use a size and a shape of cutter that is conducive to the porting you're doing. So you want to match the shape of the radius of this cutter to how basically a lot of the angles and areas in this cylinder head I can cut with this kind of cutter, and I could pretty much cut the whole port with just this one cutter. I don't have to change it. I don't have to use anything different. There are guys that'll use 3/8 diameter. There's guys that use 5/8 diameter. I find the 1/2 inch works really good for a lot of stuff. They're about, let's see, for the cast iron cutters, I think they're about $25 to $40 a piece. And that's through, I think the last time I got them through burrsforless.com was the company. And, you know, when you get good cutters, they last a long time. Well, relatively. If you do this a lot, you'll go through cutters. And I tell you, cast iron heads take forever. You're going to put a lot of time into doing a set of heads like this. So you want to have the best cutter, the best equipment you can possibly have. Obviously, it doesn't make sense if you're only doing this once. I would recommend you just buy one cutter and get yourself a couple different lengths of mandrels for the sanding rolls. These aren't as strong as these cutters, so sometimes you'll get vibration. They'll bend a little bit, and once this bends, then you will not get a smooth pattern when you're trying to sand. These bend a lot, and I will straighten them back out, and I will work on them, getting them straight until it feels smooth when I'm sanding. That'll give you the best finish. As far as cartridge rolls, so far, I haven't tried them all, but I've tried Merit, I've tried Standard Abrasive, and a few others. Standard Abrasives, cartridge sanding rolls burn up the fastest that I've tried, but they probably sand the quickest. Their 50, 60, 80 grit stuff, it works really well. I get the 1/2 inch diameter by 1 inch, I believe it is. Yeah, 1 inch long. And I don't get the ones that are tapered, and that's because they end up tapered anyways when you start sanding. So that was just one other thing that I wanted to share. A lot of this stuff you could get through Summit Racing. I bought my grinder through an abrasives company who sells abrasives and all that jazz, and it ended up being pretty expensive. But you can use an electric die grinder, air die grinder, short guy. This works fine. It beats up your hands being an all metal body, and weight and noise level do count after a while. This grinder is about 5 times quieter than this little guy here, and that makes a big difference. But it also consumes about 20 cubic feet of air per minute, so you need a pretty serious air compressor to keep up with you. Otherwise, you'll burn up air compressors. I have, and we have a big boy air compressor now, and it's worked really good. But if it's a home deal, I would recommend going electric, because unless you have a good air system, it's probably not gonna keep up with the air demand of your grinder. And as far as time, I can do an intake exhaust port chamber complete anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. And that's just taking my time. It might take some other people a lot longer, but once you know the exact areas that you want to attack, that really helps. You have to have a plan. You don't want to go in and port one intake and exhaust port like really nice, but you made them pretty big. You spent a lot of time trying to make this killer looking intake and exhaust port, and then just to realize, oh no, I put 3 hours into one port. Now I have to do 7 more intake ports and 7 more exhaust ports. Oh crap. That's how you see a lot of heads end up half ported or partially ported. Somebody realized how much time they're going to spend into it, and they're like, oh, that's not worth it. So that's why some people, I personally can do this. So I will buy heads that cost less money, and I will put in my time to make that head as good as a head that you could buy that's already ported. And I will take heads that are already ported, and I'll make those even better. There's some tricks I know to clean up the short turns and things like that on the CNC heads and the chambers to get the most out of those. So it just depends on what you have. But yeah, you could spend so much time on this stuff, and just to really have the biggest thing you can do, have a goal. Know how much power you want to make. After you know how much power you want to make, figure out your budget. See if you can make that kind of horsepower for that kind of money, and then go from there. See how much airflow that requires. And that will give you a good starting point of where you want to go with the cylinder head and with your engine program. And, if you have somebody who's helping you build the engine, or you have an engine guy, it's best to keep one cook in the kitchen and just trust that one guy. That really helps, because then you have 4 or 5 guys that you're listening to on the internet and on Facebook and all these other places. It can get pretty confusing, because you have what worked for one guy doesn't work for another guy, and so you get into these arguments, and you're asking your engine builder 97 questions every 5 minutes because other guys do it a different way. If you find a guy and you trust him, just stick with him and just follow what he says, and you'll be much happier in the end, and you won't be part swapping every 5 minutes and changing up your program. This little 69 Camaro here, guy doesn't know what he had, and brought it to us, and ended up basically being a solid roller. I don't know, I think it's a 355, but it's got dome pistons in it. Just ran horrible. But 11 of the valve stem tips are smashed. It ran on the street. It had early 90s solid roller stuff in it. So we had 3/8 rocker studs, which ain't going to work real good on a solid roller, especially big old springs. So we broke a stud girdle. Somebody really just ground the living out of these rocker arms to get them to clear these big old 1.62 springs, which, on a race motor, maybe not that big of a deal. Something I don't personally do. If I'm going to run solid roller stuff, I'm going to set it up correctly so that it'll live. And I'm going to use lifters that will have high pressure pin oiling, all that. This guy just had these pretty cheap, dinky push rods. They were not a real nice push rod or anything. So a lot of these parts, half the head bolts are different and things like that. So this whole motor, the guy's going to have me design and build him a whole new engine. And we're going to go hydraulic roller. He just wants a 12-second driver that he can go anywhere. That's something that can run his power brakes, not have issues. So we're going to do that and get him taken care of. And I'll make some videos on that process. I'm taking this out tomorrow, and I'm going to put it on the stand and rip it apart and see how bad everything else is inside, and see what's usable. But anyways, I just wanted to give that a couple updates. I think there's one other thing. The coolant ports on these Summit Dart heads. It's said that the Dart SS heads, the earlier ones, didn't have great cooling coming out through the intake manifold ports, and you'll see somebody else talking about porting them, but these ones look different than ones he explained, so I don't think I would need to do anything with these. Oil drain back's probably fine. These are my favorite seals to run for a street motor. Well, a lot of race motors too. These neoprene seals. Sometimes if you're running a full bronze guide, I'll take the spring off of the exhaust seal. They have that little round spring that goes around the end here. I'll take that spring off on the exhaust side to get a little more oil flow, but Not on this deal. It has cast iron guides, and we'll leave the springs on all of them. And hopefully that'll cure the little smoking issue it's got. So it's got brand new rings, hone, all that. So that side of it should be okay. But anyways, I will let you guys go. Have a good night. Hope everybody's staying safe out there, and hopefully we come out of this stronger in the end. All right, thanks.